Hi, welcome to Sustainability Now. I'm your host, Barbara Buffaloe, and we talk about sustainability issues throughout the community and that you can also take home with you. Today I have Vera Massey from MU Extension. Vera is a nutrition and health education specialist. I was about to just flip them.
It's okay.
Yeah, you're both.
That's
Thanks.
right.
Yeah, to talk about we talked about a couple months ago with some other people from MU Extension about, healthy foods and local foods and urban agriculture. And so what I kind of want to talk about now is, what do I do with it now that I have this haul? Either I've grown it myself or else I participate in a farm share. Mm-hmm. What do I do with all that food that I have?
Yeah, and I'm sure it's great, yummy food,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes, especially if you didn't grow it and you
Right.
got it through a CSA share or at the market, you may see things that don't look familiar.
Yes.
And what happens sometimes is we don't try things if we're not familiar with it.
Right.
Because we're afraid we might waste it, we might ruin it, we don't know what to do with it.
What if it's poisonous? What if they gave me something poisonous?
Yeah, and it looks funny sometimes.
Right.
And because we're so accustomed, I think, to having more processed foods.
Right.
So anytime we start having fresh, okay, we may have to take skin off of this, or
Right.
maybe we leave it on. So there's lots of great resources that
Okay.
we have through MU Extension.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was looking at this, and I kind of recognize this from when I was
Yes.
with Extension. And so what is this?
Well, actually, this is a book that came out a few years ago called Seasonal and Simple. And it's a nice guide that talks about foods and when they're available, encouraging us to eat foods
Okay.
that are in season.
Okay.
And also, it has lots of tips on what do I look for when I buy it. For example, if you're going to go get a cantaloupe,
Right.
there are things you look for to get a good cantaloupe.
Right.
And that's going to give you tips on that. And then it's going to give you tips on, well, once I get it, how do I store it? Does it need to be in the fridge? How long can I keep it? It'll have some of the nutritional value of the foods.
Yeah.
It's going to have really tasty, simple recipes.
I noticed that. I like things that just have 3 ingredients on it.
Yeah,
That works for
and
me.
then it's like you don't have to worry about, oh, I never keep that at home. They're
Right.
typically very basic ingredients, and it's all about being simple. And
Well, I have to say, too, it's beautiful.
isn't it beautiful?
Yes.
Who wouldn't want to eat this food?
Right. It does make it look really good.
It's very attractive, and when you think about eating, it is so much more than just the taste. When we eat, it's the color
Right.
and the texture.
Well, and with healthy eating, isn't that the idea is that having that wide variety of colors on your plate?
Absolutely.
I wish that my daughter would listen to this.
Well, what you do is you just keep offering
Right.
without
Right.
pressuring. But yeah, if half of our plate is filled with fruits
Right.
and vegetables, that's probably one of the best routes to go
And
for
this is
optimal
great.
health.
So this is organized then by season.
By season.
That's handy.
Very handy.
Yeah.
So that was sort of our first book that came out, and it's been very popular. Then we took it the next step, and we said, we're trying to work with different institutions and schools to utilize more local foods
Right.
and seasonal foods. So a great tool came out, Seasonal and Simple, for food service.
Oh, neat.
And so we've had a number of schools using these. Have been tested in those settings, which is a little different cooking than when we do it at home.
You mean like quantity?
Yes,
and
quantity recipes.
How long will it last? That kind of stuff?
Yes. And so it not only works well in schools, but there might be, say, a nursing home could be using local foods. We might have a local business that wants to use some local foods. So that's been a great resource to share. Then just coming out last month was a phone app for the Seasonal and Simple book. And you can use it for either iPhone, iPad, or Android smartphones. And basically everything was taken from the book, loaded in, no cost for the application.
Okay.
Plus they also added where you can check local farmers markets in every county in Missouri.
Oh, does it show then like if that food is in season?
Well, not necessarily in season, but it'll just talk about locations.
Okay.
So that's great if you're out and about,
Right.
and it's fun when you go to other communities to check
Right.
out their farmers markets.
Yeah.
I like to do that. And so, is it open today? And sometimes people plan their trips
Okay.
on weekends around when farmers markets are open.
Nice.
So you've got the great phone app. Then, even newer yet, is a booklet called Grow, Eat, Grow. This is taking the whole seasonal and simple concept and how we use it with children.
Okay, so this is my way of getting my daughter to eat colors.
Yes.
Right now she's on a beige diet.
Well,
I'm so embarrassed.
beige is good.
Right,
Beige is
no,
good, but
no.
long term we want to branch
Yeah,
out to
not
other
just
colors.
hummus and tortilla.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But this is great because it can be used by adults in helping kids start cooking. And, you know, research shows that children are more likely to try something if they've been involved in either growing it or preparing it.
You know, we had Emma on a few months ago too, and she was talking about that. You know, she grows her food, and her kids love being involved with it. They don't always eat it, but they do love being involved with it, and how important that is.
And I think that's the one thing that we have to learn as adults is patience with not only ourselves and adults, but with children. You just continue to provide that opportunity, and because we know just the opposite of pressure doesn't work. It doesn't work for us, and it certainly doesn't work for a child. So providing opportunities to grow foods, to prepare them, to eat them. Many of the recipes in this, sort of like our original Season Simple, very colorful, very easy to prepare, that take just a few ingredients. And so it's all about what do we do with this great local fresh food.
So then my question for you, so we belong to a CSA, and I love it. I love our farm share. But we do not, sometimes we're not able to eat all the food, or also by the end of the summer, I have eaten plenty of tomatoes and peppers, like and cucumbers. Like I'm kind of done with them. So I was going to ask you, I know that you brought some stuff in, and then you have experience with like, so how do I try to eat fresh, or how do I try to eat my local foods when it's not in the season or later on, even if it's within the season, but it's something that I got at the beginning and I want to eat it at the end?
Right, right. Well, you've got lots of options for preserving. And so you can freeze foods, you can dry foods, you can can foods. And so maybe let's talk about the easiest techniques first.
Yes, I like easy.
Freezing is something that is probably the easiest. The key is you need to have a freezer.
Right.
So if you just have a freezer that's over the top of your fridge, that works good for short-term storage. But if you're going to store something long-term,
like if I want to eat it in February or the following year.
Yeah. Because you typically getting in and out of over by a refrigerator freezer a lot. So it'd be nice to have a freezer, and you know you can purchase uprights or chest freezers. And generally the chest freezers are more economical to operate. The downside to those is that things kind of get buried.
Yeah. You know, I was gonna ask, so that if I don't have like the option, you know what I mean? Like we just have the one like a side by side and it's on there. Should I still try to freeze some things, maybe just for that winter?
You could try to freeze
like maybe fruits.
Some fruits would be good. You know, some people like to take maybe they've got some extra peppers to freeze those. One of the things that I love to freeze, I grow a lot of herbs, and you can make herb pops.
Oh?
Yeah, so you just take the fresh herbs and you get the old-fashioned ice cube trays.
Right.
And simply wash the herbs after you've harvested them and chop them. Just put them in the little ice cube trays, about half full, then fill them with cold water. Pop them in the freezer till they get hard, usually in 3 or 4 hours. Then put them in a freezer bag. And then you can pop fresh cilantro, basil, to use in cooking. And it's, to me, the color and flavor is so much better than a dried product. And so that doesn't take up a lot of space. So that might be something to freeze. But sometimes, let's say you have peppers, like a lot of red peppers or green peppers. And you can chop those and freeze them to use in
the same
sauces.
Method? Same type of, or I mean, just throw them in a baggie, or?
Yeah, I think most vegetables, well, a lot of the vegetables we want to blanch to stop enzymes, to maximize nutritional value. But for probably something like peppers or onions, just chop them and put them in, and then you can pour out what you want.
Yeah.
You know, back earlier when blueberries were in season, those are very easy things to freeze.
Yeah, and I loved having blueberry pancakes in the middle of the winter then.
Yes.
Yeah, those were great.
So freezing is pretty easy. For fruits like peaches, we're kind of moving out of that season now.
Okay.
But you might still find some peaches that some of them tend to darken. So with peaches, you may want to add a little bit of ascorbic acid or lemon juice to help protect the color.
Okay. So you wouldn't put them in whole? You'd chop them up
too? You would cut them and take the seeds out because the seed would get bitter tasting.
Okay.
So you would probably take the skin off. The skin gets a little tough when you freeze it. So you would take the skins off and the seeds and then slice them, and you could do it without sugar. Just a little bit of sugar helps protect the texture and overall color, but also a little bit of lemon juice helps too to protect the color. But yeah, apples will be coming along. I love frozen applesauce.
Oh, I've never had frozen applesauce.
Frozen applesauce is great. So if you don't want to deal with canning, you can simply, let's say you have a few apples. Simply wash them, core them. You can leave the peels on or off, chunk them up, put just a little bit of water in a pan, heat them, simmer them for probably 30-40 minutes. You could add a little bit of sugar or honey if you wanted it to it, and cool it, put it in a freezer containers, and it tastes very fresh.
Oh, that'd be nice.
So frozen applesauce is great to use.
Very nice, very nice.
Okay,
and then you also mentioned drying.
Yes. Drying is one of the oldest methods of preserving foods. The challenge we have in Missouri is that it's hot,
it's very
but
humid.
It's humid.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about drying foods is you want to get moisture out.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't work well to put your foods on trays and try to dry it here in Missouri.
Right.
So you really want to invest in a food dehydrator.
Okay.
And you can find dehydrators that either have a vertical airflow, which are usually round stackable trays with the fan on the bottom pushing up. Those are not as good because things on the bottom
tend to get more dried out.
Yes, so you're always having
to
rearrange them. There are other dehydrators that really work better where it has the horizontal airflow. So it has the fan and to the back, and all the trays then dry more evenly.
Sense. What would you dry? Can you dry just pretty much anything?
Oh gosh, you can dry. I love to make fruit leathers. Now the fruit leathers will not taste like what you buy in the store.
Like a fruit roll-up kind of thing.
Probably not. And that's the thing about a lot of dry fruits that people discover is that when you dry them yourself, you're kind of in charge. You don't have to put corn syrup sweeteners, which are in almost all dried fruits anymore, as well as oils. That's why it gives them that really different texture.
Yeah.
So when people dry them at home, they are kind of dried.
Yeah.
They're not gooey because of the corn syrup.
Right. Okay.
And so I like the more natural flavor. And when you do
healthier for you.
It's healthier for you, and you really taste the fruit versus the sweetener.
Right.
But gosh, I dried strawberries.
Oh, I bet
which
that
is
would be
really
good.
good earlier. Just slice them and lay them out, and they're great to put in oatmeal in the winter. You can
probably way better than like the cereal you buy that has dried strawberries in it now.
Exactly. You can dry things like red peppers, onions, jalapeno peppers. You can chop up jalapeno peppers.
So when you go to cook them later on, are you just putting them in, or do you rehydrate them?
Well, usually most people are probably taking peppers or onions and using something that's going to be cooked, like a pasta sauce or chili or soup.
Yeah.
And so when you put them in that
then they
liquid,
kind of rehydrate themselves.
Yes, they will rehydrate. The fruit, typically, you're just sort of
chomping on for a
fresh.
snack.
The one thing I have to remind myself is that that's a very concentrated source of energy.
Right.
So I could eat 5 apples.
Right.
Because they seem really good. Because an apple could just be about 6 slices. From a whole apple. Right. So, but drying is a fun thing to do. Again, it's an investment that you make. So I always say, think about how much you think you're going to use that form of food to determine if you're truly going to
worth it.
Yes, because some dehydrators, the really, I think, good dehydrators are probably going to run $150, $200.
Okay.
But if you think that over a lifetime, Many of them will last 25, 30 years.
And especially if you're growing it yourself, or you know you're investing in a farm share for a long period of time.
Yes. Same thing's true if you decide to get a regular freezer other than with your fridge.
Right.
Can you justify, will you have enough produce to keep that filled throughout the year? So freezing and drying are two easier ones.
Okay.
Then we get into the whole arena.
Well, I was going to say canning has become I know, I mean, it's been around for a very long time. I found lots of canned things in my parents' pantry growing up that had been there, I think, for a while. But it seems to also have regained popularity at the same time that, like, our urban food, that this advocacy has really gained more popularity.
Right. Canning, I must say, though, canning is not cooking.
Okay.
So we have to be really careful because canning is based on scientific principles, because you are taking food items, and typically vegetables are low acid. So we're taking a low acid food and trying to make it shelf stable. So that means that we're going to have to handle it a little differently with a lot more care.
I was going to say you have to have different types of ingredients or I don't know, like, you know, your whatever the stuff is, you have to do it.
Yeah, well, you have to know that there are only two safe methods of canning: pressure canning and water bath canning.
Okay.
And we use pressure canning for all low acid foods. That means all of our vegetables, meats, fish, poultry, any kind of meat, veggie mixture.
Okay.
Because if it's a low acid food item, the botulinum bacteria can produce spores. And they like to grow where there's a very low acid, room temperature, no oxygen, and moisture.
So they love, your
that's
pantry.
What they love, your little canned food items. So you want to make sure that you destroy those bacteria so they don't produce the spores. It's the spores that can grow in all that little environment of a jar of canned food items to produce the toxin that produces the botulism.
Okay.
And we don't want botulism.
Okay.
So following research-based procedures, where I would highly encourage people to use our MU Extension Guide sheets. There's the National Center for Home Food Preservation. You could just Google that in. That's based at the University of Georgia. It is your one-stop shopping for not only canning, but all aspects of food preservation.
So when you talk about that for the food pressure ones, is that one of the things that MU Extension offers is a workshop?
Right. I had workshops this past year. We offer workshops all across the state.
Okay.
And so that's really the best way to really
I was
see
gonna say,
these
I'm not
words
sure.
in action.
Yeah, I mean, I could read the guide sheet, but maybe for the first time, I might like to see somebody else showing me.
It does help to kind of put the words into action.
Right.
And so even when people come to the workshops, particularly when it gets into pressure canning, which a pressure canner can be kind of a scary thing.
Right.
But you actually see each of the steps that you read about.
Okay.
And it makes more sense when you see it. And I think it takes the fear out of canning.
Okay.
Sometimes people will say, particularly if it's a water bath canning.
Right.
And water bath is for acid foods.
Okay.
So that's for jams and jellies or pickles, where you take a vegetable and you add a lot of acid to it.
I was going to say things with tomatoes, because aren't tomatoes high in acid?
Well, tomatoes are sort of borderline.
Okay.
So tomatoes actually need either lemon juice or citric acid added.
Okay.
Because there are so many different tomatoes out there now that we want to acidify them, and all commercially canned tomatoes have been acidified for years.
Okay.
So that's an important thing we want people to know. So if you can tomatoes, you could do it in a pressure canner or a water bath canner.
Okay. Depending on whether or not you add.
Well, you add the acid regardless.
Okay.
The thing that is a downside for the water bath canner, it takes about twice as long. So if it's a hot day, they have to be processed a lot longer in a water bath if they're tomato products.
So what's happening when I'm sorry to be like naive about it, but like when you're doing like a pressure or the water bath, like what is physically happening to the stuff in there?
Okay, you are taking this vegetable. Let's do pressure canning.
Okay.
You're taking vegetables. Maybe it's green beans.
Okay.
That's a low acid food. They've been washed and snapped. And typically we say to heat the food first before you put it into the hot jar that will go into the canner. So you've got this heated green bean vegetable mixture.
Basically like I blanched it or something.
Kind of like blanching,
Okay.
only a little longer.
Okay.
Then you're going to take a canning jar, and I mean this jar happens to be filled with a vegetable already. And so you use these great tools to fill your jars, like a funnel.
Right.
So you're adding that hot food to it. The thing about doing your own canning vegetables, let's say green beans, is you can choose not to add any salt at all. Because salt is not a preservative, so that's the great thing. You can decide if you...
flavor.
That's only for flavor. And so then you're taking, actually then to seal the jar, because the goal is you're going to put the hot food in, you're going to be putting a sealing flat with a ring, and what happens is this goes into the canner and subjected to a heat treatment. Then this lid is actually moving and exhausting out air in the jar.
Okay.
Because you want to form a vacuum seal.
Right.
So you got to get the air out, and that's why the two-piece lid is what we use. And then after it's processed, and there are different time periods for different foods.
Okay.
That's why you want to make sure you've got the most up-to-date materials. So after it's processed, whatever recommended time it is for that food, the jars are taken out of the canner, and as they cool, they form a vacuum seal.
Okay.
That's what allows us to store them at room temperature. So we want enough heat treatment to destroy any yeast, bacteria, molds, and it can be stored at room temperature.
So how long can they last?
Well, ideally we say a year for best quality.
Okay.
Safety-wise, as long as you've used tested recipes, they can keep longer.
Okay.
It's just the food value, the color starts declining.
Right.
The flavor
It
may
might not taste as
decline. You know,
good.
it's the same thing in a freezer.
Right.
It's best to use that within a year too.
Okay.
We want to make sure that we store our home canned foods in a place out of direct sunlight.
Okay.
And maybe a 50 to 70 degree temperature.
Okay.
So storing them in the garage is not a good idea.
Right, 'cause it
Storing them
fluctuates.
next to the stove. So you want to treat them after you've spent all this time and energy.
Right.
To make sure they're going to be of the best quality.
Well, I remember, growing up, and my Aunt Pat always had all of the stuff down in the basement, or on on the stairs going down to the basement.
Cooler spot.
So I didn't know whether or not that she was doing it right. I mean,
well, generally
never got
basements are
sick.
cooler. Basements are cooler. In the old days, I can remember we had cellars.
right, and that's pretty much
And
what
that
this
was
is, a glorified
really,
cellar.
really cool.
Yeah.
And that cooler temperature is better for long-term storage. So yeah, we've determined the canning method based on the acid content of the food. So when we get into other food items, so meats and veggies all have to have a pressure canner, but a water bath canner is a little different, where it's you're submerging the jars with water over the tops, where a pressure canner you're doing under pressure with a small amount of water.
Okay.
But water bath canning allows us to take things like, these are red peppers. And I had a lot of these last year, not so much this year. And they're actually pickled. So you take a low acid food, you pickle it and add acid, which allows me then to use a water bath canner.
Okay, that
Because
makes
the
sense.
acid levels up.
Right.
So
adding something, pretty much any pickling can be done in a water bath.
Yes.
Okay.
Jams and jellies can be done in a water bath because they are high acid fruits. I make amazing pepper jelly. So it's a vegetable, but it has a high concentration of vinegar.
Okay.
So that allows you to use a water bath. This was a blueberry jam. What's really fun is there are a lot of canning jars out there in different shapes and sizes. What's great, and a lot of people preserve foods not only to consume themselves, but to give as gifts.
That's what I was going to say, the next thing. So we've got a couple more minutes left, and let's say that I have a record crop year. I've done great, and at the end, I've eaten all that I could that summer, and now I've canned a few things. So what do you do with it? We've got, 1 year kind of to go with it.
Yes.
What are some of your favorite things to give away as gifts?
My favorite things are things like jams and jellies or salsas.
Oh, I bet that would be popular.
You want to make sure to use a tester recipe because you're taking all those veggies and you want to make sure, but we've got some great. I made some this year. It was like a mango, ginger, onion, garlicky, very tasty.
Yeah.
So a lot of those little specialty food items are great to give. So the key thing is make sure you're using the most up-to-date recommendations so that it's safe when you give it to people.
And MU Extension, so like extension.missouri.edu.
Yes,
I remember
you
that.
remember.
I remember that.
Yes.
So going to there and looking under, I'm guessing just like for nutrition.
Publications.
Okay.
Or the other one is just Google in National Center for Home Food Preservation.
Okay.
That'll take you to another site, and they actually have some video clips that show you steps on how to do certain things. So,
and then I was going to ask, for any of these things, we can also find for sale on the Extension website, or else did you say that the app is free?
Yes.
Vera.
Yes, isn't that cool?
I like that.
I know, I know.
I kind of have gotten into the cooker that has the iPad in the kitchen now because it's a lot handier to look up.
Yes, it is. You know, some people like the feel of a book. I still like that.
Right.
But I think if you're out and about, and you remember that recipe that you've tried, and it's like you can check it out. Gosh, you know, how many pounds
does this have canning stuff things on it too?
No, just fresh, just the seasonal and simple.
Okay.
But I tell you what, one of these days I'll probably be out on canning also.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, this was fantastic. Thank you, Vera. I really. Anything else that you think we need to share just to make sure?
I think that just when you get into home food preservation, check out things first.
Right.
Things can be posted on the internet that may or may not be safe.
So going with something that's got the research based behind it is always
then
key.
Then you never have to worry.
Right.
And you never have to worry. And maybe next year consider taking a class so you can watch hands-on.
Yeah.
How to do these processes, and it's a great way to use local foods. It's just a great way to reconnect.
Okay.
And families can do this together.
I love it. Thank you, Vera, and thank you very much for coming on and talking about this.
Absolutely.
I'm actually hungry now.
Me
I was
too.
hungry before. So, all right,
too.
thank you. And yeah, that's us, Sustainability Now, where we teach you to think globally but act locally. Thanks.